friend over here. Adam, how are you doing today?
Doing good, man. Excited to be doing a Lofulous show with you for the first time.
Yeah, this is going to be crazy. I'm sure, you know, Laffy is one of the best in the industry at being the host, and he gave me some pointers, so I'm hoping that I can come close to getting all the info across to you guys. Of course, friend over here. Adam, how are you doing today?
Doing good, man. Excited to be doing a Lofulous show with you for the first
Hold
time.
on one second. Yeah, this is good. I forgot to mute my YouTube stream. I'm watching the comments here, so we can answer any questions. But I had it on the stream, so that's what you're hearing. So we're brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. Yahoo is a site I really enjoy playing on. They're always putting the player's best interest first. Today you can play in their 12K guarantee, 2K to first. And I think they do a good job of really making it a level playing field for people. And I'm looking forward to playing in their 400K baller this weekend. Adam, have you been playing in their tournaments recently?
Yeah, I maxed out the baller 2 weeks ago. Last week I took the weekend off because I was on a golf trip with a friend. But I'm looking forward to getting 150 in there again this week and getting started before like 10 a.m. Sunday morning. Kind of ran out of time 2 weekends ago.
Man, that's awesome. So you sat there and you made 150 lineups by hand.
Yeah, I got about 80 done before lock, and then the rest were game stacks of the 4 o'clock games because I underestimated how long it was going to take me to do that. But yeah.
Dude, that would have been legendary if you took that one down, just like not even entering a lineup by lock.
Yeah.
But yeah, they do a great job. It's a $10 price point this week, 50K to first. So bear with me here. I'm producing the show as well. I just showed you guys my Yahoo screen here, but hopefully we can settle in here with this game by game breakdown. We got a 12-game slate, I believe. Only 5 days left until the end of the season, and I think we got all of our playoff teams set. Are there any particular teams you're watching that might have a little bit more incentive to play today?
Yeah, I think the wild card in the American League is still open between Oakland, Tampa Bay, Cleveland. So I think that affects guys like Shane Bieber today. It affects Frankie Montas, who isn't supposed to be limited in his first start back from the PED suspension. So stuff like that, obviously does give a little bit more. At this time of year, you can wait it a little bit because you don't have to worry about someone like Shane Bieber being pulled early to conserve him for the playoffs or something because they're still fighting for a spot.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that the last games of the year, especially like we're getting into the last starts for these guys, you got to be worried about maybe some of the better players getting pulled early, and the competitiveness of the game will be key. So let's kick it off here. I think this game, Chicago Cubs versus Pittsburgh. Chicago got eliminated from the playoff race yesterday, I believe. They are actually a 180 favorite though, with Lester going up against Dario Agrazal. Lester, having a pretty decent season, but still, he's kind of declining slowly across the years. How are you feeling about Lester tonight?
On one hand, I think kind of interested just because the mid-range of pitching is so weak today. But on the other hand, at that salary, it's just really difficult, I think, in this matchup for him to put up a game that you really have to have or that you even really want to have at that salary. And it's pretty easy for him to disappoint. He's just not a very good strikeout pitcher. For the season, he struck out 21.8% of hitters. The Pirates lineup is very right-handed. Adam Frazier is the only lefty in it. And there aren't a ton of lefties or a ton of strikeouts. So I'm still not all that interested in Lester. I'd be more interested if you were like $1,000 less.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think that Pittsburgh has been tough for strikeouts for the past couple of months. Their lineup today I have as being about 10% less than average for strikeouts, and Lester only gets the average amount at 22%. So definitely not a core play today on DraftKings, but on Fanduel where he's 6,700 and Yahoo where he's 32. That's more in line where I have him today. So I think not really a top player, but maybe if he fits your lineup, I would consider it. But on the other hand, we got over under of 9.5 in this game, so I'm expecting some big run scoring potential. How are you feeling about the Cubs and the Pirates today?
Yeah, kind of surprised looking at the top stack tool on the site that on DraftKings, the Cubs are coming in with such little ownership. I thought when I did the show this morning with Josh that their prices kind of stood out. Dario Agrizal's nowhere close to being a good pitcher. In the majors this year, he has struck out like a little over 10% of hitters. And the Cubs are actually running out a pretty competitive lineup today, despite being out of the playoff race. I think that Rizzo, Castellanos, Schwarber, Contreras are all strong options at their respective positions. Ian Happ has some power with second base eligibility, and Rizzo is the only hitter in the lineup above 5K. So I kind of thought that they'd be getting more ownership just as values, but I guess with there being 24 offenses on this slate, with there being a lot of really good hitter spots, you're not seeing a lot of ownership going there, and I think it makes for a pretty good stack.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think that they're kind of flying under the radar. Maybe people are down on them now that they're out of it. But, I mean, I like this 5.9 team total. It shows that they still got a great chance of being the top stack tonight. And then Pittsburgh, I mean, much lower projection versus Leicester, but I see some good values. And a couple other guys like Pablo Reyes, Eric Gonzalez, but just real bargain values. Are there any batters you're looking to in this game as one-offs?
From the Pirates, I think there are some good values, like you said. Pablo Reyes batting 5th, Jose Ozuna batting 4th, and then you get to a couple. The 6, 7, 8 hitters on DraftKings are all below 3K, so plenty of value there. And on one hand, I guess that's appealing today because the cheap pitching is so bad. Maybe you could stack this team with 2 aces, but at the same time, they do only have a 4 implied run total. Lester's not a good pitcher, but he's not a gas can either, and we do have plenty of those on the slate. So, maybe using these guys as filler, especially the middle of the order with Ozuna and Reyes more so than anything.
Nice. Yeah, I think you got some real cheap guys here, and those are always valuable. But I'll be right back. I got to take Grisel out of my lineups per your recommendation here.
Are you on Agrizal?
No, I'm just joking around here. I mean, after Hoffman last night, I think that maybe I'm getting too carried away with these cheap guys. And Agrizal, I only have projected for about 7 points, so I have to agree with you. Next game, Philadelphia at Washington. We got an over/under of 10 in this game. Drew Smiley up against Anibal Sanchez. Are you seeing any value in these guys, Smiley and Sanchez, tonight?
I'm not. Sanchez just isn't cheap enough for me. It's an okay matchup against the Phillies, but they're running out a watered down lineup again with no JT Realmuto in it. But he's not cheap. He's not a good strikeout pitcher. Most of his value comes in his ability to somehow prevent runs, but that doesn't really get you that far when you're looking at almost $9,000. On the other side, Smiley's salary is fine, but the matchup is pretty brutal, going against a Washington team that only has 2 lefties in the lineup, and he hasn't really been much better against lefties than righties anyway. He's had okay strikeout stuff this year, but really struggles with power, really struggles with basically everything other than strikeouts. And this is a lineup that doesn't strike out a ton. You do have power with guys like Dozier and Kendrick. No Anthony Rendon is disappointing for the Nats, but still a pretty potent lineup here.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Smiley, just a tough matchup. Strikeouts should be okay, but Washington has a team total of 5.8. Oftentimes a guy that we look to for value, but maybe not today. I gotta throw a narrative in here, though. I mean, yesterday I saw everyone tweeting about how the Nationals eliminated the Phillies from playoff contention. So how do you think? I know you're not a nervous guy, but you gotta think Bryce Harper might have something here.
Yeah, I mean, Harper has to hit like 4 home runs.
You heard it here first, man. Deeper dive. Bryce Harper, four dongs. It's too bad we don't give out our dong picks because clearly that's a lock. But how are you feeling about the Phillies today?
I think there's some decent value. Harper, I think, is a little bit underpriced, even though he's the most expensive hitter by far on Philadelphia. He's still not really that expensive. And like I had said before, Sanchez really doesn't miss bats. He's done a decent job of limiting runs this year, but I don't totally buy into it either. And Harper does have the platoon advantage against him. You also have Brad Miller batting cleanup for 3,300 on DraftKings with multi-position eligibility. So that's a pretty nice price tag there. Not my favorite stack, but I do think there's pretty good value in it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that they're super cheap today. I mean, Bryce Harper under 5K, a guy with just a lot of power. Not quite as good this year, but I think they might actually be popular today, despite the fact they're not projected to do that well. But On the other hand, Washington, they're the minus 160 favorites. So they have a lot more potential tonight to be the top scoring stack. How are you feeling about the Nationals?
Yeah, I think that on one hand, it's disappointing because Rendon's not in the lineup, and that was my favorite hitter. But on the other hand, you're getting actually some pretty decent value now because you have Trey Turner's not in the lineup either. That's who else is missing. So that's two of the hitters that you would really want that aren't in the lineup. But at the same time, it makes them a little bit cheaper. You have Brian Dozier coming out now as one of the top values on the slate, leading off at second base at a cheap price tag. Juan Soto, I think, maybe goes a little bit overlooked because he's expensive and it's a lefty-lefty matchup. But Drew Smyly doesn't really do anything to get lefties out any better than he does righties. He gives up plenty of power to lefties. So far this year, a 463 ISO to left-handed hitters. So I don't think we should be shying away from Soto. And then you just get to cheaper bats like Gomes, like Victor Robles that have some power as well. So the Nats aren't as scary without Rendon or Turner, but you do get a nice trade-off in getting some better value in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the fact that those are two guys at the higher end of the order, so we're getting extra plate appearances for a lot of these guys. Notably, Brian Dozier leading off. He's not priced to be leading off at all across the industry. One of the top values on Fanduel, more than 5 points per dollar. On Yahoo, he's only $9. I mean, this guy is a cash game lock. Also, Howie Kendrick is dirt cheap on Fanduel, so I see a lot of value on this side. But because of that, this should be pretty high owned tonight. Next game, we got Baltimore at Toronto. I know they've been really delivering some good games here. I think it was a couple nights ago they went 15 innings. And we're expecting another good one here, 10.5 over-under, minus 40 in favor of the Blue Jays. Probably not the best for pitching, I take it.
Yeah, not a great spot for pitching. Two guys that really don't do anything particularly well. Jake Waguespack, 19.3% strikeout percentage to lefties, 18% to righties. He's actually given up more power to righties than lefties, but that's not something that I really buy into unless you have a good reason for it, which I don't. So I just kind of assume that lefties are going to start getting to him eventually as well. And then on the other side, Gabriel Noah doesn't strike out a lot of guys, does give up plenty of power. And even though you do have a watered down Toronto lineup, they do still have a lot of power hitters in it.
Yeah, I figure with you. I mean, it looks like 7 of their 9 guys have pretty good pop. And so they should be dangerous. And they're also pretty darn cheap tonight, too. I mean, what's going on? Like, they can't be priced down for facing Gabriel Ynoa, right?
Yeah, I mean, best park for home runs in baseball this year, too, according to ESPN's Park Factors. So a lot going right for these teams. Especially the Blue Jays, like you said, they do still have a lot of power in the lineup. Valera and Luke Miley, the two guys that I'm least interested in, but you do get Valera batting second, so he still has some appeal. I think Billy McKinney is a cash lock in the outfield. He's really cheap. He's leading off. Obviously, Biggio, Guerrero, Tellez, Hernandez all have plenty of power in the middle of that order. So we do have the Blue Jays getting a lot of ownership, which makes sense because obviously the most of the pitching that you feel good about is at the top today. So getting the cheaper bats that have a 6+ implied run total is pretty appealing. For that reason, on a slate this big, I think it's fine to come in underweight. But in terms of just point per dollar projections, they stand out as a top stack.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the home team too. One of the things I always mention, they always get one less inning unless they're extremely lucky when they go off. So it is a little bit of a disadvantage, taking into account that 6 run total, still really good potential, but the popularity is going to be huge today. I mean, these are some of the best values on the slate. On Yahoo, we got Breivik Valera. He's $7 betting second. I mean, that's insane. McKinney's only $9. He's really cheap on every site. So not sure what the site saw and to give these Blue Jays the discount. But on the other side, we got the Orioles, and they're also projected for more than 5 runs. How are you feeling about them?
I like them as well. And looking at the aggregate ownership, they look like they're a little bit under-owned, whereas the Blue Jays are projected to be over-owned. It's obviously a good hitter's park for both sides, and Waguespack, while he's better than Gabe Ynoa, isn't any good. The Orioles offense really isn't that terrible right now either. VR, Hayes, Mancini are all quality hitters. Dwight Smith has some power, and then you just get really good value with guys like Ruiz, DJ Stewart, even Chris Davis, if he accidentally hits the ball, has some power. So it's another team where I think you can get to really good pitching by stacking them, but as a team, they're getting less ownership than the Blue Jays, which makes them appealing.
Nice. Yeah, so a little bit of lower ownership for the Orioles, even though, I mean, this is going to be a great game. One strategy that I always find amusing, I was listening to the Study Minute that Manny Laura puts out every day, and he was saying there's one player who would just like game stacks every single day in all 150 of his lineups. Have you ever like tried that strategy?
I think I know who you're talking about, but no. I have kind of thought about it recently. I think we've even talked about it on a show, just because this time of year with the expanded benches, you get so many pinch hitters. Like looking at the Indians last night, looked like they were going to be the stack you had to have to win tournaments, and then half their lineup was pinch hit for in the sixth or seventh inning because it was 11-0. So if you were going to employ that strategy, this is the time of year to do it, just because I think there is a little bit of increased value in trying to find a game that's competitive throughout. But it's still not really something I do. And one reason where I think it's tough, or you at least have to, if you are gonna play around with it, you want to at least be paying attention to each individual game, is like Josh and I tried to game stack this Toronto-Baltimore game this morning, and it was actually basically impossible to do with good pitching, at least, because Jonathan VR is the only shortstop eligible player in the game, and he's really expensive. So you want to at least, if you were going to try and go that route, you need to be flexible and be paying attention to potential problems within any one game.
Yeah, that's a great point you make about the position eligibility, and especially on DraftKings and Yahoo, where you don't get that flex position, it makes it a little bit harder to build lineups. If you're picking two teams, I mean, sometimes maybe there are teams that don't even have a guy of a certain position. Like if neither team, I've seen a couple of slates on Fanduel this year where it's a nice slate, only one guy at the position eligible. So if you're just putting in Fantasy Cruncher and you're saying stack me up like these two teams, you got to realize that if you have too stringent of settings, like maxing out the two teams like 5-3, 4-4, that may eliminate possible combinations of teams that you might want. So
yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like an advanced concept, I guess. And if you can identify those spots, you might find some teams that you can put together that might be a little bit lower on than you think. And if, as you're saying, VR is expensive and not going to show in optimizers, that could be very well the case here. But overall, I think if you're going to game stack, this is probably going to be the one that comes up in your optimizer for sure. Despite that, just like everyone else is a superb value. But we got this next game, the Yankees versus Tampa Bay. This is more of a pitcher's duel, it looks like. We got the bullpen game for the Yankees, but then we have Morton starting out for the Rays here. Are you on Morton today?
Not really. He's affordable on FanDuel at $9K, which stands out, and he's $46 on Yahoo. So I think both of those salaries are more enticing than $11K on DraftKings, but still a pretty tough matchup against the Yankees. I think he's a really good pitcher, but we also still do have DeGrom against the Marlins. We have Bieber against the White Sox. So, and we even have Frankie Montas against the Angels. So it's still tough for me to really prioritize Morton.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, on DraftKings 11,000, that's going to really limit your flexibility with your roster positions. FanDuel actually is looking like a good value at 9K, like you mentioned, and 46 on Yahoo certainly is reasonable. This Yankees lineup I have is about average for Ks. That's because they got some guys like Tyler Wade at the bottom of the order. They have Stanton, Judge. These are all high strikeout guys. But this lineup has a ton of power. It should be slightly mitigated by the fact that they're in Tropicana. It's indoors, so it should be a little bit harder to hit the extra bases. But, I mean, that's still a tough matchup for Morton. And then on the Yankees, I saw that Happ is going to be coming in for 2 to 3 innings. Are you looking at any pitchers for the Yankees?
I'm not. Happ's just more expensive than I would He's 8,700 on DraftKings. I don't think you really need the saving. I don't think you really need to dig that deep at pitcher on Yahoo. And then obviously on FanDuel, you don't really want to roster a guy who's not starting, since it just automatically lowers your potential. So not interested in the Yankees side.
Yeah, for sure. The over-under in this game is only about 8.5, the Rays being a minus 140 favorite. How do you feel about the bats here then?
Not all that interested. It's a good pitcher's park. It's a really good pitcher in Morton. It's okay pitching from the Yankees, but I think that, like, you have Joey Wendell, who's an okay value leading off, but I would just rather roster Brian Dozier at that position, or even Breivik Valera from Toronto. The rest of the lineup just doesn't really do a whole lot for me. Tommy Pham's not in there. I don't really have much of anything from this game.
Yeah, I have to agree. Joey Wendell would be the guy if, for some reason, like, he were playing if there's like a turbo slate with only these 6 p.m. games. I mean, maybe, but like in a 12-game slate, probably not worth it. So this game, I think, aside from Morton on FanDuel and Yahoo, I gotta show my friend Manny some more love and deem this a Manny special. We got the Mets versus Miami. This is remarkable because I think this may be the lowest team total I've seen for any team all year. 2.7 for the Marlins facing DeGrom. So I think that means DeGrom's going to be pretty popular tonight. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see any way around it. Like, Miami is as good a matchup as you're going to get. DeGrom obviously is one of the best pitchers in baseball. This is the lowest run total that I can remember seeing as well. So, I'll be looking to get contrarian with my bats more so than I'll be looking to fade DeGrom, I think.
Yeah, so just to break down the numbers, I mean, he's gotten 32% Ks. This Marlins team is a little bit better than average. I gotta reference my pitcher strikeout stats here. Duggar, he have him for 35%, so not really gonna move the needle a ton, but that's high enough compared with the rest of the guys on that team to be a plus matchup. And I mean, he's expensive across the industry, but not quite the Jarrett Cole levels that we saw yesterday. But we did see Syndergaard get blown up like yesterday to some extent. I mean, not blown up, but he disappointed. So do you think people might give these Marlins a little bit too much credit, possibly?
Yeah, I mean, that would be nice. They've gotten to DeGrom already at least once this year too. I just remember because I wrote him up in an article and then got crap for it because he got lit up by the Marlins. But hopefully people will take that kind of stuff into account.
Yeah, I mean, if people are taking into account the TVP, team versus pitcher stats, then maybe they're going to shy away from DeGrom. But as far as I can tell, that's pretty much the only way someone could use logic and end up without DeGrom on their lineup. Projected to be 50% owned on DraftKings tonight, so going to be very popular according to our ownership projections. On the other side, we got Duggar. I mean, not a high strikeout guy, 16%. So this Mets lineup also has a good amount of power. Actually, a pretty good lineup, I have to say. How do you feel about the Mets tonight?
Yeah, I think they're pretty interesting. I think that Brandon Nimmo leading off really stands out. He's only 4K on DraftKings. He has plenty of power. Obviously McNeil and Alonso are pretty much always strong plays. And then you get to more value, though, because you have Michael Conforto back to the cleanup spot. You have Wilson Ramos batting 5th on an incredibly weak catcher slate. He's a good hitter, especially for a catcher, and he's affordable. You have Robbie Cano as a second base pivot to Brian Dozier. Like, Cano's ownership should really come down now that you have Dozier and Valera for less money hitting at the top of their respective teams. You suddenly have a contrarian play in Cano, so I like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know he was one of the most popular players last night, but it just shows that how quickly the pendulum turns here. I mean, I'm not sure if he got a price bump or if the matchup's just a little bit tougher today, but not really jumping out as a huge value for me. The whole team for the Mets is a little bit better than average on DraftKings by average and value on FanDuel, and on Yahoo they're a little bit tougher to get to, so I'm expecting the ownership to be a little bit low. So I think that's a decent play. If I'm going with the Marlins tonight, is that digging deep or is that going off the deep end?
Yeah, I think it's off the deep end. Not somewhere that I intend to get to.
So that would be a little bit too cute, I take it. I mean, this lineup, it has 9 guys who are below average in power. So another reason why DeGrom is standing out is, I mean, the reason why we're seeing these high over-unders these days compared to a few years ago is the increase in power in the MLB, and this team just doesn't have power. So we got Boston at Texas. I think this one should be a pretty good one. A Globe Life for run production because we got this 12 over under. Boston, a 130 favorites. Of course, Boston recently ruled out of playoff contention for the first time in a while. I think they even won the World Series last year, didn't they?
Yes.
That is quite the fall from grace. So.
Yeah, won the World Series, and then so far they've fired their general manager and not made the playoffs in the following year.
That is crazy. I mean, it's kind of surprising they didn't make the World Series because great lineup. I mean, one of the top batting lineups every single slate they're on. Of course, a very difficult division with the Yankees and Rays in there. But how are you feeling about the Red Sox today?
I think it's a really interesting spot because obviously they are in great hitting conditions in Texas. They're facing a rookie in Colby Allard who's had some success, had some bad games, projects as kind of a middle of the road guy right now. And so it's a good spot. They're getting a lot of ownership as a team, but a lot of that ownership is going to Chris Owings batting ninth, who is $2,200 on DraftKings. He's basically minimum price everywhere. So, but he's not any good. So, like, he's a good point per dollar play, but he's the kind of guy where if you stack Boston and don't include him, you kind of are just ruling out a lot of. You're unique from a lot of Boston stacks that will include him. So, if you were to pay up for the guys at the top that are more expensive and harder to get to, it gives you an opportunity to be a little bit more contrarian, even though their aggregate team ownership is really high.
Yeah, I like that strategy because I know a lot of times as you get more advanced in DFS, you start using lineup optimizers a lot more. A guy like Owings will maximize your overall team projection, but not necessarily help you win because a lot of people with the Red Sox are going to be drawn to him. I'm seeing a lot of guys like because Colby Allard is a lefty, all the righties are really popping, as well as the top of the order guys, Benintendi, Devers, who are lefties, but really Bogarts, Martinez are really standing out. Gorkas, Hernandez. But what do you feel about the lefties in this lineup?
I think that's another way that you can be contrarian with this team. You know, basically the hope, like they don't match up all that well against Colby Allard. You know, guys like Benintendi and Moreland and Bradley. But the hope would be that they just get to him early, that you get to the bullpen, and then you just have, you get the platoon advantage later on for these guys. The fact that Moreland is starting over Travis, I think, is interesting. You're not really worried about pinch hit risk there because if anything, they would have just started Travis against the lefty. So you don't expect him to get pinch hit for later, which is nice. So yeah, I think that it's just another way that you can be contrarian within your stack because people are going to obviously prefer Bogarts, Martinez, Vasquez, Hernandez, Owings over the lefties.
So you're telling me there's hope that if this game is 11-0, Moreland won't get pulled out of my lineups.
Did not mean that. I meant that there's not really pinch hit risk against the bullpen because they're starting him against the lefty. Like if they bring in a righty, they're obviously not going to pinch hit. Normally, what would happen is he starts against a righty, and then they bring in a lefty, and Travis comes in.
So my intuition is telling me here that Cleveland is still vying for a playoff spot, but Boston out of it. So do you feel like these teams that have a little bit less to play for might stick it out a little bit longer with their guys if they're having a good day?
I don't know. I don't really know how to feel about that. Like I think like intuitively it makes sense, but then you also just consider the grind of a season and you look at JD Martinez. If it's 11-0 on the road in Texas, what does Boston have to gain from having him play? So I don't really know. Like I could see it going either way.
Okay, yeah, so that's something to look out for. I mean, a lot of us got burned last night with Cleveland. I myself, I looked at my lineup, I had like 100 points, 25 innings remaining, but all the innings were these Cleveland guys, so I was pretty disappointed. So, what you've been saying this whole time really came to fruition for us Indians stackers last night. On the other side, we got Texas, 5.8 team total. Not nearly as high as the Red Sox, but still pretty good. How are you feeling about them?
I think they're a really interesting team in tournaments because they're just getting so much less ownership than Boston. But one of the big draws for Boston, obviously, is this park, especially when you consider that they have a watered down lineup, but the run total is still so high and they project so well. So a lot of the things that are working in Boston's favor are also working in the Rangers' favor. Rick Porcello is not a good pitcher. Below 20% strikeout percentage against both sides of the plate, 204 ISO to lefties, 214 to righties. Shin-Soo Choo, Willie Calhoun both stand out as really good options for me. Ronald Guzman gives you some value at first base. I think that clearly they'd be behind Boston in terms of projection, but I don't really think they're that expensive. Santana is the only hitter on DraftKings over 5K, and I do still like the matchup against Porcello.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I mean, Porcello has had some good years in the past, but this is not one of them. 5.5 ERA. So his luck has come back and swung the other way. And Texas, I mean, the weather is going to be favorable. The prices vary wildly on the site. DraftKings is kind of middle. Yahoo, they're more expensive. Fanduel, they're dirt cheap. Like, every player is under 3K. So how would you handle that on a site-by-site basis?
What was the question again? Sorry.
So on FanDuel, I mean, these guys are much, much cheaper than DraftKings and Yahoo. So how does that affect your strategy overall?
Assuming that it's bringing added ownership to them, then it affects the strategy just because it's not as appealing a stack as it is on DraftKings if they're going to be higher owned. But if the ownership still isn't really getting there, then obviously getting like a $2,300 Ronald Guzman is really appealing. But even so, I think that there's probably enough different ways to go with this team that you can make some contrarian lineups on an individual basis, even if they are getting a bit more ownership on those sites.
Yeah, I agree with that. On FanDuel, where they're popular, I think that if you can figure out a sneaky stack to pair them with, one of these deeper cuts, I think that could be a good strategy. But if you're just picking DeGrom or picking the Rangers, I mean, you might be up against, in a 20K tournament, 500, 1,000 people with the same strategy. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes it easy to cash, but difficult to win. And that's something I like to avoid. My top stacks tool, you can find the team ownership for every team. We're projecting on DraftKings, the Rangers will have 3.8% of all ownership. On FanDuel, they're more than 4 times more popular with 13%, but they have between a 5 and 6% chance of being the best team on the slate. So I think that really highlights how your strategy should vary based on the pricing structure. I mean, while they're a better play on FanDuel, on DraftKings, they're much less owned, so you gotta balance these factors. And sorry, I gotta break into my read here. I'm working on it. It's my first time, but yeah. The thing is, in DFS, the games are getting way tougher. I mean, there's a lot of smart guys, not just the two of us. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there. Dozens of dudes who make DFS a full-time career. So every day you're playing against guys that are spending hours a day of research. And that's really a reason why I started Osmo.com, is so that you have a reliable source of information to draw from every single day without having to spend full time developing your own projections, developing your own ownership. And recently we've been really trying to make it easier to build good lineups by combining these two factors into one tool. And I think that's why the Top Stacks tool is a great place to start your DFS research, because it really breaks down the slate into the ownership and projection at once and gives you that broad view of what everyone is doing on a given day. How'd I do?
Yeah, no, good.
Thanks, man. Next game, we got Cleveland at the White Sox. We were talking about the Indians as a playoff potential team. I think they're in the wild card race. They're minus 300 favorite versus the White Sox. Bieber versus Detweiler. So I think we were talking about Bieber at the start of the show, potentially being a guy that might go deep in a game. And he's a great pitcher, of course. So how are you feeling about him?
I mean, I really like him. It'll really come down to what kind of an ownership difference you're going to get between him and DeGrom. Right now, we have DeGrom getting almost a little less than double the ownership on DraftKings. I think DeGrom is the preferred option just because the matchup against Miami is a little bit better. You do have a pitcher in the lineup, whereas the White Sox, even though it's bad hitters, they have 9 major league hitters in there. But the ceiling, I think, is more or less the same for these two. Like their numbers for the season are almost identical. Bieber has a 30.4% strikeout percentage. DeGrom's at 31.8. 3.35 Sierra for Bieber, 330 for DeGrom. So in terms of ceiling, I think that it's really close. And if you're going to get an ownership discount on Bieber, he becomes a pretty interesting tournament option, especially with how many strikeouts the White Sox are running out there today as well.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think that I actually think it's a better strikeout matchup for Bieber. Bieber is at 30% on the year. DeGrom is at 32%. But the White Sox team, the lineup today is especially good for strikeouts. I have them about 15% better than average for getting Ks, whereas the Marlins were just a hair above average. So if you add those numbers all up, I got Bieber for 9 strikeouts and DeGrom for 8.5. Of course, the Miami game, Miami has a team total of almost a run less. So the chances that DeGrom limits run production are much higher than Bieber. But in a GPP, we're not playing for the most probable outcome necessarily. We gotta play for all the scenarios where maybe DeGrom has a bad day, maybe Bieber has an excellent day. So I think it's certainly worth having exposure to both of these guys tonight.
If you had to just choose one for any format, it would be DeGrom cash and then Bieber tournament, right?
Man,
giving you the lofty question.
Yeah, this is a tough question. I think I'd go to DeGrom in both. I mean,
yeah.
So I have DeGrom for several more points in projection because of that run differential. DeGrom also goes slightly deeper in games. But it is pretty close. The salary is almost a wash. But I think DeGrom is my favorite play, and because he's only one of 9 guys in my lineup, I'm happy enough. Just hoping the other 8 win it for me. But I like the spot because Bieber, of course, has a lot to play for with these Indians, and the strikeouts are excellent. So I think it's they're both excellent. So it is a little bit hard to choose.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. Detweiler, not a strikeout guy, only 15% in the majors this year, so I take it you're fading him.
Yeah, I'm not interested in Detweiler.
Yeah, we have him at 0.1% projected ownership, so he's
Seems
gonna.
too high.
Yeah, yeah, good call, man. So I think that we're probably skipping over the White Sox unless you want to. It's not really super contrary, or I mean, it's not super leveraged because DeGrom is a more popular pitcher anyway.
Right, yeah, it would be more interesting if Bieber were getting more ownership. The one thing Bieber has struggled with this year that DeGrom hasn't is Bieber's allowed 1.3 home runs per 9. So it would be more interesting to me if the good White Sox were a little bit cheaper. But 4,600 for Yohan Moncada, it wouldn't be surprising to see him take Bieber deep, but you're still paying for it. Whereas, you get guys priced down normally against aces. You're not really getting that for the White Sox.
Yeah, they don't have very good price tags for sure. One guy that does stand out is Lurie Garcia on Yahoo, $7, but I mean, probably digging too deep. But on the other side, we got the Indians. They are projected for 6.5 runs versus Detweiler, and how are you feeling about them?
Yeah, really good spot. It looks like right now we're projecting the Red Sox to steal some ownership from the Indians, probably mostly because of guys at the bottom of the order like Chris Owings. You don't really get any free guys on the Indians. Lindor, Mercado, Santana, Ramirez are all relatively expensive. Nice values on Puig and Reyes, but no one that jumps off the page like a couple of the Red Sox guys do. So that should keep the full stack ownership down a bit for Cleveland. It's obviously a really, really good spot. We know that if they jump out to a 10-run lead again, they're probably going to get pinch hit for. But I think that's the case for probably every team on the slate, or almost every team. Maybe a team like the Orioles that is trying to see what they have and young talent will leave them in. But outside of that, I don't think there's more pinch hit risk for the Indians than other teams. So I do like them quite a bit just because it's a little bit harder to get to them as far as stacks go.
Yeah, maybe people got burned last night. They might not go back. I did see Oscar Mercado was the lone starter to remain in the game, at least the last time I checked. So maybe he would be the guy to look to. But I actually do like the stack a lot. As you were saying, it helps if the other team stays in the game. So what you're really hoping for is both teams to put up runs. A little bit less likely because of Bieber, so there is some GPP consideration here to fading the Indians, despite the fact that their team has such a high total and they're a big favorite. The ownership isn't too high. But I think that it's worth taking some shots on, like your strategy with Boston of like pointing out Owings is so high on compared to the rest of the guys. So a lot of different situation. Like maybe that'd be a reason to go to Boston because you can be a little extra contrarian by having a Boston stack without Owings, since so many will have him. Cleveland a little bit more fairly priced across the board. We got Atlanta versus Kansas City. Josh Chapman hitting the starters list today. What do you think about that?
I don't think he can go too deep into this game. He threw 10 pitches 5 days ago. He hasn't thrown 20 pitches or more than 20 pitches since September 2nd. So I assume this is just kind of a true bullpen game. Soroka was going to be the starter today, but they pushed him back to Sunday to try and line him up for where they want him in the playoffs. So I think basically a bullpen game here for Atlanta.
Yeah, I was just more amused to see Tomlin, a fantasy relevant guy a couple of years ago that won us some money, but now bullpen guy, not even a great one. I mean, 5 xFIP on the year. Montgomery on the other side, one of the cheaper pitchers of the night. He is a 140 dog to Atlanta tonight, but he's 4.4K on DraftKings, 5,600 on Yahoo. And on on Fanduel, and on Yahoo he's the most expensive at 30. Do you have any Montgomery on DraftKings?
Yeah, I think DraftKings / Fantasydraft, he's a fine option. It's not that you feel really confident in him, and it's still a dangerous Atlanta lineup, but they are missing Freddie Freeman, they are missing Acuna, and the mid-range today is just so weak that there's not a ton of opportunity cost to just taking the cheapest guy that you can. I also think he's just more talented than his price tag. He's thrown 226 innings as a starter since the start of the 2017 season. He's allowed a 320 WOBA, 4.2 xFIP, 52.5% ground ball percentage, 18% strikeout percentage. The strikeouts obviously are below average, but the rest of that stuff is average or better. And at $4,400 and fully stretched out, I think that there's more upside than downside for him.
Yeah, I think it's not the greatest spot in the world, but that $4,400 price tag really encapsulates the risk of going up against a tough lineup in the Braves here. So I think he'll help you get to a lot of good players. So definitely in consideration tonight. And then the bats, I think this might be another game where the bats are really popular. The over-under is 10, and I'm seeing a lot of good values. How are you feeling about the Royals and the Braves today?
Yeah, not surprisingly, we have Kansas City projected for a lot of aggregate ownership. It looks like they're priced for Mike Soroka. So, like on DraftKings, the most expensive hitter is Jorge Soler at $4,300. I think that the top of this order, like they're obviously really good plays. Merrifield, Soler, Dozier in particular. Soler and Dozier have tons of power. Merrifield's just a good all-around player. But then the rest of the order is just really cheap. So it's one of the teams that you could stack with, with DeGrom plus Montas or something like that, and get away with it. So I think that probably drives a lot of ownership to them in optimizers. It's still not a really high probability spot, I don't think. You're talking about a bullpen game, and in general, those are just not really that appealing because you're getting so many fresh arms. You're getting managers can really match up, righty lefty throughout the game too, especially this time of the year. So I don't think it's really a high probability spot, but I don't mind some one-offs with like Soler or Dozier.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I mean, the bullpen game isn't that exciting to target, but the prices are really good. Those are situations where I tend to avoid it just because the ownership gets out of whack. On the other side, I mean, a much better team, but also very well priced on certain sites, the Braves. What are you doing with the Braves tonight?
Yeah, I think that it's another team. We talked about the Nationals being a better value than usual because of guys they're missing, and it goes for Atlanta too. You have Dansby Swanson jumping up to the top of this order now. I think he's one of the best point per dollar shortstops on the slate. Josh Donaldson's one of the best point per dollar third baseman. You have a nice value catcher in Francisco Cervelli batting 6th. So maybe a little bit more ownership than they should get just because those guys are cheap. But probably more so just on those players individually. Like Albies is still kind of expensive. Markakis in a lefty-lefty matchup probably won't get a ton of ownership. Duvall is relatively expensive. So I still think that if you're 5-man stacking Atlanta, you're going to be pretty contrarian because most people are going to be just, picking and choosing Swanson and Donaldson and Cervelli.
Yeah, I like that. It looks like some of the guys are a little bit less valuable as far as points per dollar, and that can make a chalk lineup into a contrarian one. So that could be a great strategy. I'll note Ozzy Albies on Yahoo is $21. By far the most expensive player in the team, so that's a perfect example. Like one of the better players on the team, and maybe if he has a good game, that could win you a tournament on Yahoo. Next game, Colorado versus San Francisco. I mean, these Giants got to my guy Hoffman yesterday. Are they going to do it to Samardzija today? To Melville.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Melville's any good. He's last I checked, he was getting some ownership on DraftKings just because, again, he's cheap. Right now we have him. His ownership dropped a bit. He's down to 12%, which I think makes sense. There's nothing really special about him, and the Giants lineup now is better than it has been for a lot of the season. We don't have their lineup today, but assuming you're going to get, Yastrzemski, Belt, Longoria, Vogt, Dickerson all in there towards the middle, it's really not that bad of a lineup. Melville struck out about 21% of hitters at AAA this year. He's at 18% so far with the Rockies. It's a nice park shift for him. I don't hate it if I get him as an SP2 in some DraftKings lineups, but I would, if I'm paying down, I would rather just go all the way to Montgomery, save another 1,200 because I think he's the better pitcher anyway, and the ownership's comparable.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with you. Not that exciting of a strikeout guy. The matchup isn't that great versus the Giants. Not quite as excited as I was about Hoffman yesterday. Of course, that didn't work out. And he's not going to be that contrarian. But on Fanduel, he does stand out at that $5,500 price tag. I think it'll be hard to find many guys that are worth anything at that. So I could see if you want to go double expensive stacks, maybe get into Melville. Samardzija, on the other hand, he's having an okay year, but only 19% Ks. How are you feeling about him?
Kind of surprised he's only projected for 15% ownership on DraftKings right now. I think that's like the correct amount, but I just kind of thought that it would be higher because he's the only viable, well, John Lester, I guess, but Samardzija is basically the only viable option in his price range, and normally that will drive up ownership. Not to mention, he's in San Francisco. He's got a favorable matchup against the Rockies, who have been one of the worst offenses outside of Coors Field. But it really just comes back to Samardzija not being a good pitcher. Even his numbers at home this year aren't any better than they are on the road, which is really surprising. If anything, they're actually a little bit worse, which isn't to say that you would rather have him on the road, but it just points out that he's really not that good of a pitcher. His salary is only where it's at because he's pitching in San Francisco and he has a good matchup. So while I think he is the best mid-range option on DraftKings, I also think that I just prefer my lineups if I'm paying down at SP2.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be hard to get DeGrom and Samardzija at that price tag and like your bats. So I think it's a good strategy. Giants, they're standing out as a decent play tonight. Less than 2% ownership across the industry. You got some Giant stacks?
Yeah, I think that they have a implied run total over 5 right now, which is really surprising in San Francisco. They are reasonably priced, but not getting a lot of ownership, like you said. And the lineup's just deeper than normal. Alex Dickerson has power. Vogt's a strong catcher option. Belt's a good hitter. Yastrzemski has power. The park still sucks, obviously, but so does Tim Melville, and they're not getting any ownership, so why not?
I like it. Giants have been a void team in fantasy for so long, but maybe this new lineup, it has more power. They'll win some GPPs. The next game, we got a pitcher's duel, Frankie Montas, who you mentioned, versus Andrew Heaney. So what is standing out to you about Montas tonight?
His Yahoo price tag in particular, he's $35. But he's fully stretched out. He's been throwing 100-plus pitches in simulated games. He's obviously well-rested after missing, I think it was 75 games for his PED suspension. He's been really good this year. He's struck out 26.2% of hitters. He has one of the lowest barrels per batted ball percentages in baseball, 3.72 Sierra, only a 5.7% walk percentage. All that stuff's really good. And then you get this Angels lineup, which is missing Trout, is missing Upton, is missing Ohtani. You have David Fletcher, Albert Pujols, and Andrelton Simmons, who are all very difficult strikeouts. But outside of that, Goodwin, Calhoun, and then the whole bottom of the order are favorable strikeout matchups for Montas. At 10-1 on DraftKings, he's not a priority. It's more of, if I end up with the salary in that price range, then sure, why not? If I can't get to like DeGrom or Bieber without blowing up my lineup. But on Yahoo, I think he's a priority at $35. Like, I would so much rather have Montas than $32 Lester or $30 Montgomery.
Absolutely, man. On Yahoo, Cash Game Black, great GPP play at that price. He should be more like 50 probably. Heaney, he looks like he might be a bargain on Fanduel. Have you been looking at him?
Yeah, I think Heaney's really interesting because of how weak the mid-range is today. Like, Samardzija is the preferred option because his median projection is decent for his salary and because people like perceived safety. But Heaney has much better strikeout stuff. He's got the highest strikeout percentage on the slate other than Lamet, DeGrom, Bieber, and Morton. He's at 28.9%. 21.6 K minus BB percentage. He does give up home runs, which is, of course, an issue against this Athletics team that has tons of right-handed power. But, as you mentioned earlier, in tournaments, you're more concerned about maximizing your ceiling than the probability of actually getting there in any individual lineup. And where Heaney's priced down, he's giving you the highest ceiling, I think, just in terms of strikeout stuff compared to any pitcher around them.
I like it. I mean, great strikeout potential. There's also a good potential he'll get blown up, and that's all we like in GPPs. I mean, the A's have a 5.7 team total. So do you think people are going to be shying away because Heaney is an above-average pitcher?
Yeah, shying away from the A's or shying away from
Shying away from the A's.
Probably a little bit. I think that there are a couple of values that really stand out, though, that'll drive up ownership a bit. Matt Chapman and Chris Davis, I think, are two of the better values at their respective positions. Davis homered last night, so maybe he's going to make a late push to competence, but Chapman's price tag really doesn't make any sense. Kana's cheap as well, so I think that at the very least those guys will grab some ownership.
Nice. Yeah, on our top stacks tool last time I looked, it looked like they're a little under-owned. But yeah, I see that Chapman and Davis both have really high ownership on DraftKings. So it's kind of a situation where certain guys are going to be really popular and others might be sneakier, so that's an interesting situation for the lineup construction.
Yeah, it just goes back to paying attention to individual ownerships in your lineup as opposed to team aggregate ownerships only.
Nice. The Dodgers, they fooled us all yesterday. I guess I should have listened to Chris Randone when he told us on the stream that Ross Stripling was pitching tonight because he's supposed to pitch last night according to some of the balking experts, but I'm pretty sure he'll go tonight facing Dinelson Lamet, a great strikeout guy, but one who doesn't go deep in games and is facing the Dodgers. Are you seeing any plays that pitcher here?
Not really. Even though Stripling's starting, I'm not expecting him to go too deep into this game. Per Chris, he had said a week or two ago that he's basically stuck in no man's land going 3 or 4 innings. So unless I hear that that's different, which it doesn't appear that it would be, it's tough to get to Stripling. And then on the other side, Lamet does actually have the highest strikeout percentage on the slate, but really, really tough matchup against the Dodgers. He's not priced down on DraftKings at 10K. He's reasonable at 8,300 on FanDuel, but if you want a high strikeout pitcher in a bad matchup, Heaney is $1,100 less than Lamet is. So I think that's the preferable option. And then on Yahoo, he's $38, which would be fine, except Montas is $35. So it's just, and Heaney's $38. So it's just really, really tough to get to Lamet because of the matchup.
I have to agree. I mean, he's more expensive than some better guys like Heaney, as you mentioned. And then the Dodgers, always one of the more powerful teams in the league. It looks like they might be a little bit under-owned tonight. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that the ownership's interesting because I don't love the spot against Lamet. I do think he's really good. He's seemingly figured out how to get lefties out, which was his issue a couple of years ago when he first came up, but he hasn't had that issue so far this year. Tons of strikeouts, but at the same time, the Dodgers, for one, they're affordably priced, and for two, we know that they have tons of talent throughout their lineup. Bellinger, the most expensive hitter on the team on DraftKings, is only $5,100. So if people aren't going to go to them and they're going to just write them off because it is a tough matchup, I love getting teams like the Dodgers in tournaments at low ownership just because of how much power they have.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, Lamet's only one guy. If they get him out of the game, then they're going to be facing the worst Padres relievers, so that could be a really nice spot. We got Greinke versus Kikuchi in the next game in Seattle. Houston is a minus 300 favorite, as you might expect. Team total 6.5. Greinke is pretty expensive across the industry, 10.4 in DraftKings, 94 Fanduel, 51. I know last time Greinke pitched, we were kind of saying that maybe he's a little bit overrated as far as fantasy potential. Is that still how you're feeling about him today?
Yeah, I think so. It's a good spot against the Mariners. It obviously wouldn't be surprising at all if he has a good game. But what it really comes down to for me is, you have him or you have Montas at similar prices on DraftKings and FanDuel. On Yahoo, he's way more expensive than Montas, obviously. But, you have a favorable matchup for Montas. You have a favorable matchup for Greinke. One of these guys strikes out over 26% of hitters, and one strikes out 22.5%. And if anything, Greinke has the name value to drive up his ownership a bit as well. So I think that, like right now, even on DraftKings, we have Greinke projected for 2.5 times as much ownership as Montas. So between the two, I give a slight preference to Montas' ceiling, and I think he probably comes in lower owned on those sites too.
I like it. And Montas, we got to give him a bump for all that PED use.
Right.
Houston, they got the team total 6.5, so one of the higher ones in the slate. What's your approach to the Astros tonight?
I'm actually really torn on them because, on one hand, the top stack tool looks really, really favorable because we have them getting like 1/3 of the ownership that they should. But on the other hand, I think in the context of this slate, that actually kind of makes sense because as a team, they are just so much more expensive than everyone else. And so you would actually need them in most cases to be like the top scoring team. It's unlikely that you stack Houston and win without them really blowing up because you have to make such sacrifices at pitcher and with one-offs, and it's tough to find as much upside with the pitching. So like I love getting a team like Houston at low ownership, but at the same time you can get a team like the Dodgers that is going to come through less often but still has the same kind of power Houston does, and they're just much cheaper, so you don't have to sacrifice as much throughout your lineup.
Yeah, that's true, but DFS is all about sacrifice, man. I think that one of the top projected teams of the day, and there were some shots for that reason alone. So I guess that's the last game, and of course that brings us to our next segment, the top stacks. Who are you rolling with?
Cleveland and Boston minus owings.
So are you not you're not afraid that Cleveland is gonna pull all their guys again if they go off?
I think they will, but I think pretty much every other team will too. So
that's true. I guess you gotta get the guys who score the most before getting pulled.
Right.
I'll go with Houston, Boston, and Cleveland. So I guess we're gonna be duking it out for first today, man. If these teams go off.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, hopefully, if we all put in these stacks, including everyone watching, they'll go off, and one of us will take all the money here. Adam, any final thoughts on your approach for tonight?
No, I don't think so. Just looking to be as contrarian as I can with bats, because I think that the opportunity cost of trying to be contrarian with pitching and play the popular hitters is really, really high. So I would rather just hope that some of these, really popular value hitters hit to their actual abilities.
Definitely. I think that's what we're hoping for every day. And if it comes right like once or twice a month, then it's a good month.
Yep.
DeGrom, one of the best spots of the year, certainly Miami. The 2.7 team total. A lot of good bats, but maybe they're getting pulled early, so it'll be a really interesting slate. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks to Yahoo for sponsoring the show. Make sure to enter their 12K guaranteed tonight and the 400K baller this weekend. And we'll see you tomorrow. Me and Adam going without Laffy again. I think we might get through it, but he's a big guy to fill the shoes for. We'll catch you tomorrow.